Okay, today we're going to talk about Woketard, Libtard, progressive Democrat policies that are actually regressive policies. I'm going to start off with Malcolm X. A lot of people don't like the reading, but there are a lot of audible learners out there who don't want to sit down or they can't read. A lot of people are just functionally illiterate. They got dyslexia and otherwise, and so it helps them out. Now you have to remember these quotes, they're going to be paraphrased, come from a time, we're talking about the early 1960s here. Early 1960s, before the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Now, Malcolm X uses the word Negro all the time because, once again, it's the early 1960s. I'm just going to substitute word black because that's what we use today, and a lot of blacks take umbrage, there's a good word, with the use of the word Negro. And before I start reading this, I want to tell you why I got to this point. I was over at a coffee shop down in Denver that I have an interest in, and I was talking to my business partner one day, deliberately. There's a black gentleman and a white lady behind us, and I said out loud so that he could, something to the effect that, well, you know, says I didn't think I was a racist before, but I sure the hell am now. And I said it loud enough to be able to get their attention, and I heard a huff. And I turned around and I looked right at the black guy and I said, yes, but you failed to ask against which race am I racist against? And he goes, well, okay, that's a fair statement. And I said, white liberals. And so, of course, the female got a little offended because she's a white liberal, right? So now that's the reason why I segue into Malcolm X, because I had just recently read some of Malcolm X's quotes and his speech on some of the problems that were going on back 60 years ago. 60 years ago. The white liberal is the worst enemy to America and the worst enemy to the black man. That's a great way to start off, isn't it? Let me first explain what I mean by this. White liberal. In America, there's no such thing as Democrats and Republicans anymore. That's antiquated. In America, you have liberals and conservatives. That is what the American political structure boils down to among whites. The only people who are still living in the past and think in terms of I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican is the American black. He's the one who runs around bragging about party affiliation, and he's the one who sticks to the Democrat or sticks to the Republican. But white people in America are divided into two groups, liberals and Republicans, or rather, liberals and conservatives. And when you find white people vote in the political picture, they're not divided in terms of Democrats and Republicans. They're divided consistently as conservatives and as liberal. The Democrats who are conservative vote with Republicans who are conservative. Democrats who are liberals vote with Republicans who are liberals. You find this in Washington, D.C. Now the white liberals aren't white people who are for independence, who are liberal, who are moral, who are ethical in their thinking. They're just a faction of white people who are jockeying for power the same as the white conservatives are a faction of white people who are jockeying for power. Now they are fighting each other for booty, for power, for prestige, and the one who is the football in the game is the black. 20 million black people in this country are a political football, a political pawn in economic football, an economic pawn, a social football, a social pawn. This one comes out of a 1964 speech, highly redacted because of his constant reference to his batshit crazy, insane Muslim religion. Islam, Christianity, Judaism, they're all batshit crazy. People believe in things that are patently absurd. There's no empirical evidence to be able to support anything that they believe or say, yet they're willing to kill people over it. This just goes to show you how absolutely insane the greatest majority of people are in the world, not just the United States. All right, so the time is past when the white world can exercise unilateral authority and control over the dark world. The independence and power of the dark world is on the increase. Now remember, this was written in 1963, right? The dark world is rising in wealth, power, prestige, and influence. It is the rise of the dark world that is causing the fall of the white world. As the white man loses his power to oppress and exploit the dark world, the white man's own wealth decreases. His world is on its way down. It is on the way out. Yeah, he was a racist. In fact, most blacks are racist. They're far more racist than whites are. They won't admit it, but they know they are, because everything to the black community is about race. Everything that's wrong in their lives comes from some white guy holding them back or holding them down, or it's the man. It's not the fact that they didn't go to school or they didn't want to sell out to the white guy and actually get an education. I know a lot of blacks out there that are extremely successful. They went off to college. One guy in particular, he came from a lower income family in the South, joined the military, got his degree, became a military officer. I mean, he's a better man than I am by far. All right. You and I were born at this turning point on history where we are witnessing the fulfillment of prophecy. Our present generation is witnessing the end of colonialization. Europeanism, Westernism, or whiteism. The end of white supremacy. The end of the evil white man's unjust rule. Yeah, as though it's, evil, right? Evil, unjust rule. It just goes to show you. All right? I must repeat, the end of the world only means the end of a certain power. The end of colonialism ends the world or power of the colonizer. The end of Europeanism ends the world or power of the European. And the end of whiteism ends the world or power of the white man. All right? We'll be looking at this in just a minute. The American government is trying to trick her 22 million ex-slaves with promises that she never intends to keep. Now, right there, he calls 22 million. Now, this is 1963. There were 22 million blacks in the United States at the time. All right? And he used ex-slaves, as though everybody that's black in the United States was an ex-slave. All right? In today's world, we have 41.6 million blacks. All right? And we're going to go through the voting here in just a second. Okay? With promises that she never intends to keep. The crooked politicians, well, it hasn't changed. The crooked politicians in the government are working with the black civil rights leaders, but not to solve the race problem. The greedy politicians who run the government give lip service to the civil rights struggle only to further their own selfish interests, and their main interest as politicians is to stay in power. In this deceitful American game of power politics, the blacks, that being the race problem, the integration and civil rights issues, are nothing but tools used by one group of whites called liberals against another group of whites called conservatives, either to get into power or to remain in power. Among whites here in America, the political teams are no longer divided into Democrats and Republicans. The whites who are now struggling for control of the American political throne are divided into liberal and conservative camps. It's a recurring theme, which is true, still true today. The white liberals from both parties cross party lines to work together toward the same goal, and white conservatives from both parties do likewise. The white liberal differs from the white conservative only in one way. The liberal is more deceitful than the conservative. The liberal is more hypocritical than the conservative. Both want power, but the white liberal is the one who has perfected the art of posing as the black's friend and benefactor, and by winning the friendship, allegiance, and support of the blacks. The white liberal is able to use the black as a pawn or tool in this political football game that is consistently raging between the white liberals and white conservatives. Politically, the American black is nothing but a football, and the white liberals control this mentally dead ball through tricks of tokenism, false promises of integration and civil rights. In this profitable game of deceiving and exploiting the political politician of the American black, those white liberals have the willing cooperation of the black civil rights leaders. These leaders sell out our people for just a few crumbs of token recognition and token gains. These leaders are satisfied with token victories and token progress because they themselves are nothing but token leaders. According to the New York Herald Tribune editorial dated February 5, 1960 here, this is 1960, out of 11 million qualified black voters, only 2,700,000 actually took the time to vote. All right? So now let's jump back, because I went and looked this up in a modern context. Now, some of the numbers aren't as current as we'd like them to be, but this is what I've got. All right, there are 41.6 million blacks in the United States today. Of those, 30 million are eligible to vote. Right? So obviously, we're going to have kids in there. People under the age of 18 can't vote. People with felonies can't vote, and so on. We've got 30 million eligible black voters in the United States. All right, that 58.4% or 17.5%, 17.5 million actually voted in the last election. All right, 58.4% of the 30 million eligible black voters, for a total of 17.5 million voters actually voted. Blacks actually voted. All right? So I'm going to jump forward a little bit. This once again goes to the 8 million non-voting blacks are in the majority. They are the downtrodden black masses. All right? So he's referring to those blacks that didn't vote in the 1960s. There's 8 million of them, and he calls them downtrodden black masses. Well, let's go to some real numbers that people just don't like, right? Now, these are just numbers that people don't like, and things are what they are, and stop whining about it. The average annual income for an Asian is $95,000 a year. Okay? The average Asian income per person is $95,000 a year. The average white income per year is $75,000 a year. The average black income is $46,000 a year. 46. Well, let's look at the numbers. The average Asian IQ in the United States, the numbers that I could find, 106. 106 average Asian IQ. A lot of those Asians come here from rice paddy poor China. Within a generation, they're millionaires. Why? Because they're smart and they know how to be able to play the game. And they don't go on welfare and they don't blame other people. They go out and get 2 or 3 jobs. They save money. It's a one-way valvular conduit. Money comes into their community, but they don't spend their money outside of the community, so the whole community gets rich. Right? The average white IQ in the United States, 101. 101. The average black IQ in the United States, 87. You see a correlation? You see a correlation? Now these are average IQs. Obviously you're going to have standard deviations to the left and right. Right? You're going to have a lot of dumb whites running around out there. And they're not going to fare very well economically either. Why? Well, because they can't handle the math. They can't do the math. They can't handle complex concepts. So they have to do jobs that are more perfunctory, more rudimentary, and manual labor. Some manual labor pays really, really well. Being a bricklayer, being a carpenter, be a framer, roofers, concrete layers, asphalt guys. Yeah, this is perfunctory. That's back-breaking labor, and they get paid really, really well. Now, admittedly, those are jobs for younger men. You can't expect a 50-year-old guy isn't going to be out there roofing or laying asphalt. There are a few out there. I've seen them do it, but it's really a young man's game. All right? Now, on the numbers with respect to how many are Republican or Democrat, Asians, I couldn't find any solid numbers on the Asian communities because they're extremely diverse. Asian, does that mean China? Does that mean Japan, Taiwan? Does Singapore, Philippines, Indonesia? I mean, Korea, it's all over the place, right? So when we say Asian, that's and then a lot of people consider people from India being Asian, East Indians being Asians, even though they're actually Caucasian, just like people from Nigeria. Not Nigeria, it's Ethiopia and Eritrea. Those are Caucasians. Their skin is dark, but they're actually Caucasian. Okay, but of the whites and blacks, currently, 54% of whites are Republican, and 39% identify as Democrat. Of course, you got independents in there, you got libertarians, and so on. But these are general numbers. And then in the black community, 7% are Republican, and 87% are Democrat. 87% of blacks are Democrat. Well, that tells me that the Democrat Party is the party of poverty and failure. It's that failure. It's that plantation mentality, and the super rich. You'll get dum-dums like Jared Polis, you'll get Tim Gill, you get Pat Stryker, you get Bill Gates, you get all the Woketard Libtards out in California, the Hollywood weirdos. They're just disgusting people out in Hollywood. They offer, other than acting, shut up and sing, right? And so the Dixie Chicks back in the day. You stay out of the politics, shut up and sing, and in case of Hollywood, shut up and do your job as an actor or a singer, and then stay out of politics. We don't want to hear it. All right? So there you go. Those aren't numbers that people like, but that's just the way it is. So if you're downtrodden, why don't you go to school to get an education? Oh, you don't want to. You don't want to go to school to get or you don't tell me you don't have the money, because there's plenty of money out there for you to be able to go to school, especially if you're a marginalized community, as they say. Marginalized community. What a stupid idea. All right. So let's go into marginalization. All right. These woketards, these libtards, the modern. I'm an ex-Democrat. I'm a classically liberal ex-Democrat. More of an independent libertarian thought process when it comes to government. Government governs best when it governs least. And it's not the proper place for federal government to be sticking its nose into every little aspect of American life. And how do they do that? Through contract, remember? Yeah, the bastardization of the Interstate Commerce Clause. All right? So let's get some definitions. I got this off of one of these Woketard websites, and because if you're going to fight your enemy, you need to know your enemy's definitions, right? So this is diversity. Woo, diversity is the presence of differences that may include race, gender, religion, sexual orientation, ethnicity, nationality, socioeconomic status, language, ability and disability, age, religious commitment, or political perspective. Populations that have been and remain underrepresented among practitioners in the field and marginalized in the broader society. Ever hear of meritocracy? You know, if what are you going to do? You're going to bring in a black Jew to be a mathematician if he doesn't understand the math? Are you stupid? I'm never going to be an NFL superstar, an NBA slam dunker. You know, I'm 6 feet high, I weigh 142 pounds, right? I've never had that capacity, and yet somehow the NBA, the NFL are supposed to be they're supposed to be inclusive, bring in people based on language and ability, disability, religious commitment. What are you people? It's all about corporate America, corporations in general. If they're properly managed, and they're not, because most American corporations, most corporations around the world are managed by fools, absolute fools. These people, I could go in and take their job. I could take Biden's job and not even try hard. I wouldn't even have to lose sleep, because Joe Biden shows that any moron can be president of the United States. You don't have to have any real capacity, ability, or intellect to be president of the United States now that we've got Dementia Joe up there. All right? So now look at that ridiculous idea that diversity remain unrepresented among practitioners. Now if you're saying that, in something that doesn't matter, if you want to be able to have some diversity, okay, great. Like if you're a coffee shop and you want to be able to hire in people, and you want to have a few in there, and you've got the funds to be able to afford losers to come into your business and work and sap the strength of your business, well, that's your business. You run your business the way you want to. But most businesses, they want the most highly qualified individual that they think will stick around, which is why there's a max IQ to be a cop, right? And who won't steal from them and won't cause any problems, like a modern-day snowflake. No employer with any brain should ever hire a snowflake. Like anybody under the age of 30 is very suspect. Anybody under the age of 30, if they've got purple hair, tattooed up, and so on, it's just very suspect. They could be conservative in their thought processes, but the chances are more likely than not, they're not. Right? So you have to be, so most corporations, what do they want? They want people that's not going to steal, aren't going to cause problems, that are going to show up for work and are going to stick around. They're not going to work for 2 months and then quit and go on to something else. All right? Here's their definition of equity. Whoa, equity. Wow. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. All right. Equity is promoting justice. Promoting justice. What's your definition of justice? Justice, these social justice warriors, this nonsense. Justice is being allowed to keep what you've earned. If you commit a crime and you earn yourself a life sentence, there you go. There's your justice. You've been sentenced to life, for a crime that you didn't commit. That's injustice. If I go out and work 40 years and buy a nice house and cars and I got my retirement money set aside for me, being allowed to keep what I've earned over 40 years is justice. All right? If we create a taxation system that takes from me and gives to somebody who's lazy, wants to sit on their butt, or drug addicts and so on, says that's not justice, is it? Now, we're not talking about people who can't fend for themselves. They can't provide for themselves. Anybody over the age of 65, anybody who's disabled, certainly veterans, those persons with mental infirmities, You know, they have the diminished capacity, autism, Down syndrome. So we're not talking about that. The government does have a place under what's called the Parents Betrayal Doctrine to take care of those persons who are elderly and infirm. All right? So nobody's talking about violating the Parents Betrayal Doctrine, especially when you're talking about substantially older, in their 70s, 80s, and they have dementia. All right? So there we go. Justice is being defined as keeping what you've earned. Right? So if you're promoting justice, that's a great concept. Impartiality and fairness within the procedures. Equity is promoting justice, impartiality, and fairness within the procedures, processes, and distribution of resources by institutions or system. Distribution of resources. Well, wait. It continues. Tackling equity issues requires an understanding of the root causes of outcome disparities within our society. Outcome disparities within our society. There is no outcome disparity. It doesn't exist. What's the bellwether of communism? Equal outcome regardless of input. I say this to military members all the time. An E5 computer programmer makes the same salary as an E5 dishwasher. So the military is set up using a communist economic as opposed to political. Okay? Communist economic system. You get a rank of an E5, E6, E7, whatever it is, and regardless of how much work you do, you get the same amount of pay as the guy who sits on his butt in a supply depot somewhere and doesn't do much. All right? So there you go. That's what they're talking about, the root causes of outcome disparity. So what's equity? Communism. You take from those who produce and give to those who don't. All right? That's what equity means. Take from those who do produce and give it to those who don't, so you have an equal outcome. All right? And inclusion, their definition of inclusion is an outcome to ensure those that are diverse actually feel and are welcome. So we're talking about their feelings. Oh, you've got to feel like you're welcome. We're kowtowing. We're bending the knee to people's feelings. This is where that snowflake and trigger warnings come from. These are Woketard, Libtard thought processes, and as those of us that are in positions, they're employers, those of us that have any real capacity or intellect, we have an obligation in a free society to start speaking out, pointing and laughing at these people. They're mentally ill. If you've got a man who puts on a dress, whacks off his genitals, goes through genital mutilation and takes hormones to grow breasts, the man is mentally ill. Now that doesn't mean that he's mentally ill, right? But I sure the hell wouldn't employ him, and I sure the hell wouldn't have anything to do with him. Why? Because he's mentally ill. They're very irrational people. They act out in violence all the time. And the mentally ill do act out in violence. And when the police pull somebody over that's clearly mentally ill, they're sitting there rocking, they're doing all of these other things that cause you to believe that they're mentally ill. The police handle them very, very carefully, because you can't tell. One minute they're all smiles, and the next minute they're stabbing you to death. Right? Inclusion outcomes. Outcomes, once again, are met when you, your institution, and your programs are truly inviting to all. Well, I'm sorry, but if I have a club that's for men only, I don't want women coming in. I'm sorry, but women should not be on the tessellated floor of a Masonic lodge. Sorry, it's a men's club. Women have the Eastern Star. It's not appropriate for women to be, passing the Tyler in a Masonic lodge. This is just, they've gone crazy. They've gone crazy. To the degree to which diverse individuals are able to participate fully in the decision-making processes and development opportunities with the organization or group. Yeah, so we're going to have people that are mentally ill in the decision-making process for some organization. That's what we got up in Congress, and it's what we got in the military. The idea of women in the military with respect to front-line duty is absurd. Women are useless in combat positions, absolutely useless. I'm in my 60s. You give me a 20-year-old, trained, infantry-trained female, I'll take her right off her feet. I'll beat her to death. Not a problem. Wouldn't even slow down. I wouldn't even break a sweat doing it. This is ridiculous. I'd gouge her eyes out, punch her ass. It's absurd. Absolutely. They just don't have the violence. They don't have the bone density, the muscle mass, the oxygen redox, the stamina, and they just don't have the sheer violence that men have. Men grow up to be. I was bullied as a kid. You know, I got into martial arts when I was in high school, and I've been at it for 45 years. You know, some time off in college and some time off in my mid-20s, but substantially I've been at it for a total of around 45 years. You know, I don't care. This is ridiculous. Anyway, the point being is that woketards and libtards are insane, and we need to stop listening to this nonsense. Thank you for the time.